Picture. I just want you all to know I'm just like you all. My wife and I, this is my wife and our 4 daughters. We have had our kids in Christian schools for many years. My wife teaches in a Christian school. We have a passion for Christian education, and we believe that it's extremely important long term to really to the health of our country. Go to the next one here. This is just a brief introduction about who we are, and then we're going to move into why what you're doing is so important in the fundraising process. How many of you are familiar with Josh McDowell, by any chance? I used to work for Josh 20 years ago, and that's really where the origins of this type of fundraising came from, with your Golf and Walk event 2 years ago, and now with the Serve-a-thon. And Josh is a very strong advocate and proponent of our ministry. In the last 20 years, starting with when I used to work for him, we've done over 2,000 events, and have seen a lot of money raised to date. But fundamentally, it's about funding kingdom work. And I think it's sometimes awkward to talk about money and ministry in the same sentence. They just don't seem to be compatible. But money is an essential tool for ministry. If there were no money, this ministry would not be able to occur in the lives of your kids. And it's important for us to understand that we have a role to play in that process. The way God has established His kingdom, He requires us to be part of the process in many different ways, and that's true in fundraising and fund development as well. So as we talk about money tonight, keep in mind that it's a tool that's necessary for impacting the lives of your kids and their friends. This next slide gets at why it's so important that you have a vital ministry that occurs and continues. Hit the next slide here. 4%, some of you may be familiar with the statistic, but about 6 years ago, I believe, Josh McDowell and then several other ministries on separate occasions commissioned Barnum Research and the Gallup organization to conduct polls, and they were trying to determine what is the trend of the church in America. And what they found was very disturbing, and that is that in present evangelical homes in the United States, only 4% of the children living in those homes currently are expected to walk with Christ after college. I mean, think of how small the evangelical community is now. And if only 4% of our kids in the next generation are going to be active in their faith, it's a horrible implication spiritually in our country. And I was spending some time with Josh about 2 years ago when he was in Birmingham, and I was telling him how I appreciated him spending so much time at a lot of the Christian school national conferences with ACSI and some of the other Christian school associations. And I said, why? I'm just curious, why are you spending so much of your time at these conferences? And he said, I believe that Christian schools are the last hope for the church in America. He said the church isn't able to fulfill really its ultimate goal of building biblical worldview in the lives of kids to the point that they understand the legitimate reasons for their faith and will be faithfully walking with Jesus after they become adults. He said Christian schools, in my opinion, are the last hope for the church. And I really believe he's right. You know, he has been a sort of a forerunner. He's way out there sensing things that a lot of us don't sense until a little bit later in the process. But I just want you to think about the significance of your school, not just in a short-term standpoint, but long-term. Next few minutes, I'd like to talk about fundraising and how you do that effectively, and some of the key principles that I think it's important for you to understand. Number one is that I mentioned earlier that money is a tool, and that's true. And it's an essential tool. But ultimately, none of us can control how much money is raised. We can control the activity that leads to the result, but we can't control the result. The results are in God's hands. And that's why one of the names that He gives Himself in Scripture is Jehovah Jireh. What does Jehovah Jireh mean? The Lord our provider. So He is still in charge of the ultimate provision of your school. But He requires us to be part of the process. And that's where we can be faithful in the activity. And there are a lot of things you can do from an activity standpoint to raise money, but I believe there are very few things that you can do that are very strategic and really have a high return, and this is one of those things that does have a high return. 3 key principles here at the bottom. Number one, people give to people they know. That is the most important fundamental in fundraising. Don't think that you have to sell the cause and the vision and the mission of ECA to people that don't know about it in order for them to give. They're going to give because of your relationship, because people give to people they know. Secondly, you have to ask in order to receive, and we know why people are uncomfortable. We'll talk about that in a second. And number 3 is you get what you ask for. And way too often in ministry fundraising, we under-ask, thinking there's something spiritual about that process. Okay, so in terms of where we are right now with the recession, a lot of people have a question, is it even appropriate to ask for money during a recession? So I'm going to ask you, is it appropriate to ask for money during a recession? What's the answer? Yes. You might feel a little uncomfortable. Not everybody can give, but it's absolutely essential and it's appropriate to ask. I believe what we do is we present the need to somebody and let them respond generously to the degree that they feel inclined to. But the encouraging thing to me is that when you look at fundraising and giving trends over the past 6 recessions we've had prior to this one, there are a couple of things that are interesting. Number one is, in every year during the recessions that we've gone through since 1967, up until last year, giving in America has continued to grow. At a slower rate, but it's continued to grow. Last year, for the first time ever since these numbers were tracked, going back to the 1940s, for the first time, charitable giving in the U.S. actually went down in 2008. And it went down across the board in every nonprofit sector except for one, and that was ministries. Ministry giving was still up 2%. So because people believe it's important and are willing to give sacrificially. A couple of other points during recessions that are important because they tie into this. Number one is that the donor relationship, the relation between the donor and where that money is going is more important than during regular times. They want to be more closer connected. And finally, more money goes to life-impacting causes than others. So when you look at what we're doing with this campaign, the donor relationship is connected, it's life-impacting, and it's ministry. So you're really in a great place from a fundraising standpoint. Okay, how the funds are raised. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in a moment, so I'm going to pass over this slide. And what I'd like to talk about at this point is just unpacking the people give to people. If you think about it, first thing I'd like to ask you is this. When the kid comes by your door, let's say from another school, or a Girl Scout who's trying to raise money or sell cookies, and you give to that person, how does it make you feel? What do you think about it? How does it make you feel? Good. It does, doesn't it? I mean, it feels good to give. And we need to keep that in mind, that when you ask people to sponsor you, they're going to feel good to give. You're not asking them to do something that they are going to feel uncomfortable with. The second thing is I'd like to point out is this example with a niece in Miami. Miami is about as far away in the country as we can get from here. And let's say that you have a niece in Miami, and let's say tonight you come home and there are 10 letters on your counter asking for money. And 9 of those letters are direct mail pieces from reputable charities. The 10th is from your niece in Miami saying, would you sponsor me in our walkathon for the Miami Mango Club? Okay? How many of us are going to send money to our niece in Miami? It's 100%, even for those of us that raise our hand. Okay, do we even care about the Mango Society? No, but we're still sending money. Okay, do we care? Does the fact that she lives across the country factor into your decision to give? No. So the geographical location of the people you're asking to sponsor you does not matter. The main thing is you ask them and they're going to send money in from all over the country. And what's real interesting, those other 9 direct mail pieces from reputable charities, how many of us are probably going to give nothing to those 9? It's high. Those 9 are selling cause, your niece is selling a relationship. People give to people, money goes to relationship. So just be really encouraged that you can ask, and you can ask confidently, and people, if they can give, will give. The final thing I want to emphasize here is the Christmas card list, because that's the place where you have the closest relationship. So go to your Christmas card list, sit down with your kids, and compile a list and have your kids involved in the process and use that really as a ministry opportunity for them to be part of helping fund their own school. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Next slide has to do with you have to ask in order to receive. What do you think is the number one reason people are uncomfortable asking for money in something like this? The word no, right? It's the fear of rejection. Here's what's encouraging. If you ask people politely, even those that can't give are still going to respect you more and admire you more because they know you're working for something that you believe in. So the key to remember is that if you ask, people will give, and statistically about 80 to 90% will give. If you just send out the brochure, about 30% will give on that. If you follow the brochure with a phone call, close to 90% will give. So the key is to send out the letters and make the phone call.